So 9 out of the 10 poorest states are red. Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. And as always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So I saw it reported many times by leftists that 9 out of the 10 poorest states are red. They say this all the time that I've heard. And of course, what they're implying here is that being in red states is basically tied to being poor and being at the bottom. Whereas being in blue states, in liberal leftist states, is synonymous with being rich and having this great life, supposedly. Now, obviously, there's a lot of wrong with this, because as you know, when you're dealing with leftists, you're not dealing with all the information. You got to get all the information, because they're going to tell you only the parts that they want you to hear, and they'll just completely omit the rest. They do this all the time. But the number one problem that I see with this notion is that poorest and poor are two different things. They're not the same. Just because somebody is the poorest person somewhere doesn't mean that they're poor. You know what I mean? If you have 10 men in a room, right? If the poorest man in that room is a multimillionaire, yeah, he may be a millionaire guy with a network of $500 million in a room with billionaires. So he may be the poorest person in the room, but he's far from poor. And this is how you have to be careful of the tricks that the left tries to play. Also, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the unit of measurement? Because are we talking the total per capita income, or are we talking about the whole population? Because there are states with a lot more population than others. Now, in order for them to really come up with this ridiculous, this basically narrative, I would believe that they have to cover this. This has to be accounted in the study. However, I don't put anything past the left. From what I've seen, don't put anything past the left and what these people are willing to do to push a narrative. There's another thing that you have to take into consideration is cost of living. Cost of living is very important, because then cost of living tends to be higher in these leftist states because of the leftist policy that causes the cost of living to be higher. Let's take for instance, Los Angeles and Dallas. The cost of living in Los Angeles is much higher than it is in Dallas because of stupid leftist policy and the decisions that they make. So if you have a person who's a police officer in Los Angeles makes, say, $100,000 a year, and a police officer in Dallas makes $80,000 a year, yeah, the police officer in Los Angeles makes more money, but the cost of living in Los Angeles is so much more higher that the police officer in Dallas is going to be much better off, making $20,000 less, because the cost of living is so much more higher in Los Angeles. So then who's really truly the poorest there in that situation? And another thing I would say, lastly, the thing that you have to also take into consideration is how did the states get there in the situation that they are? Because let's look at California. California is probably known as the richest state in the whole country. It's basically going back and forth with Texas. But when I was a child, I remember California was a place that people went for opportunities. This was the land of opportunity, right? You had the Hollywood, it's known for Hollywood. You had the rich and wealthy, the celebrities, all of the famous people were in Hollywood. And then you had the tech boom, right? You had Silicon Valley is in California. So the tech boom really took off in California. And then you had the aviation boom. The aviation boom also really truly took off in California. The thing is though, when California became the Golden Coast and everything that we know of California, it was a red state. So you cannot look at everything that California was known as at one time as basically happening when it was a blue state, because it was a red state when all this was happening. I mean, California was a red state as early as when Reagan was in office, and Reagan basically primarily mostly because California voted for him in 1980 and 84. So he was in office for 8 years, and during that time, California was a red state back then, and that was only in the 80s, so that wasn't too far away. So California, everything that California is known as, it did when it was a red state, not when it was a blue state. And now under stupid leftist policy, it's losing all that. Remember, the cost of living wasn't that high back then. It only became high because of stupid leftist policy. So then, like I said, if you take all this in consideration, now I would like to look at the other supposedly the rich state. How did they become rich? Massachusetts. Was Massachusetts always a blue state, or considered blue, or is it just Boston that's making it blue? And other states as well, or, Illinois. So you cannot take that basically that narrative true. It doesn't really mean much until you take all factors into consideration, and that's something that the left doesn't do. So once again, I'll close with this, that sure, they made these 9 states may not be the richest state as far as total income and GDP of a state, but they're not poor. There are plenty of people having good lives in these states, and of course, if you look at the list of the states, Louisiana is one of them. Well, there's a lot of people in Louisiana living nice lives, having good lives in this state, and people aren't poor. The poor people in any state are the people who generally don't want to do anything and want to slip off the government. That's just how it is. But once again, when you hear these leftists talk about 9 out of the 10 poorest states in America are red, it means absolutely nothing. And as always, y'all, until next time.